Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP. In the last episode I mentioned that things are going to be moving fairly quickly from here on out, and today marks the very first episode of that in the many rapidly planned Minmus missions for an increase in science. If we're going to get back to where we wanted to be right before the restart, then we're going to need the science in order to get there. And what I mean by there is interplanetary. So first we're going to go to mission control, but there's no missions that will provide us any money for what we're going to do, so there was nothing to show you there. Here we are taking our Black Widow satellite communications that you saw in a previous episode, and we're just going to reutilize that for a tourist mission. We're going to take Jebediah and Bob, the scientist, because this is also going to be a mission for science, and then one tourist who wants to fly by Minmus. So first we're just repurposing the craft. It didn't need to have any kind of EVA capabilities before, but now we have some science aboard, so we're going to throw some ladders on there so Bob has something to hold on to. And we're just going to grab every single science piece that we can, minus the Science Junior, I believe. It's been a little bit since I've recorded this episode. I have the whole Minmus series recorded. I'm going to try to find a way of compiling them together to kind of consolidate it so it's not so many episodes of just... Oh yeah, here it is, the radial Science Juniors. Can't forget those. So anyways, here I am just putting everything on an action group. We are going to be retrieving science from both high in space and low in space above Minmus. We're going to just do a flyby with the crew capsule, and with the Black Widow we're going to place that in a polar orbit, and hopefully that'll be enough to start off our Minmus communications network. If you missed the building of this rocket, it was in a previous episode. I will link in the description. And it was a pretty simple build. It's very similar to a lot of the stuff we built on the channel. So those are two solid rocket boosters on the side, liquid fuel engine in the center. Very simplified, very nice. So we are going to speed through the launch profile of this, since it's very similar to many that we've done before. However, we're going to leave a lot of the Minmus mission uncut, because technically this is the first time these Kerbals have done it. And yeah, we want to kind of show the whole process through it. In the following episodes, we are actually going to speed through a lot of the previous stuff and focus more on the landings at Minmus, because we start off with a crewed landing instead of a probe, and then we move on to bigger and better things. We do quite a lot at Minmus, and we set ourselves up for a nice jump start on our plans. So we had safe separation of our SRBs. We now have a safe separation of our fairings. We're only at 51 kilometers, but it's safe enough to do that there. And now we're coming up to our apoapsis and circularizing. Gotta turn down the gimbal limit to make sure that we don't go wobbly all over the place. 22 seconds left of burn, and we are circularizing there, so we have a little bit left, 457 meters per second of delta V left. And we got 100,000 funds for the massive amount of rocket that we got into orbit, because we're using massive scale launches. So now we're going to utilize that 400 meters per second delta V in our inclination change. So we're going to come here at the ascending node and pull, I believe that's anti-normal, until we get as close to zero as possible, and give it a nice little push. And there we go, we have our maneuver. Don't have too much fuel left, but surprisingly we have more than we need in order to execute this. We're actually going to be able to utilize that lower stage fairly well. And that's important when it comes to Minmus stuff, because at least when it comes to Minmus base building and all that, it's better to have more than you need. So when you land your craft or you get your craft into orbit, if you can manage to get it in with a full tank, you're doing good. All right, so now we have a low inclination, or low number on our relative inclination. So now we can go ahead and plot our our transfer burn. I accidentally scrolled my mouse wheel. That's why it moves so fast there. Don't know if there's a way to turn that off. I never use my mouse wheel to lower or raise any of my trajectory points. Don't understand it. I don't know if that's stock. It might be stock. So we're coming in here, and we're gonna try to get a nice polar burn on polar orbit on this, so that way our dropped-off satellite has the most amount of connection to the KSD as possible. If I can get a horizontally polar orbit, that would be even better, but we'll take whatever we can get. And the mission here is to drop off the satellite in a place where it can receive the remote tech communication signal to create its orbital burn on its own, while the Kerbals themselves come in at a low angle, at a low altitude, and so they can collect both high and low science. The Black Widow satellite definitely has enough Delta V that we could have just left it on there, let the Kerbals do their low science, or low space science, and then let the satellite do its own maneuvers. However, I just want to, I kind of want to split the mission in two and kind of balance two crafts at once. I think that'd be pretty interesting and a good challenge and good practice for future endeavors. I'm going to turn down the gimbling here. I don't like the way that it was wiggling. This particular engine has two bells on it, so it has two different bars to slide for the gimbal limit. And with that, our burn is done. We're going to have to check our work, of course. And it overburned a little bit. Remote tech isn't great, but it's pretty good. I prefer it over MechJub. MechJub is very good, and a lot of people like it, and you'll probably like it too. But I just, I started with remote tech before MechJub, so a little bit partial. But anyways, it's kind of funny, if we were to keep this trajectory, we would impact the moon, or the Mun, excuse me. And I want to time warp my way out until I can get communication with the KSC, so that way I can separate my crafts and plot in the maneuver. Yep, there's the Mun encounter, but the fact that we don't have an escape on it leads me to believe that we would crash right into its surface. So it's important to have communication with the satellite before that happens. So before we do anything, let's go ahead and change our inclination. I figured initially coming in where the Kerbals would come in would be better, but I think coming in at a polar inclination here, releasing the satellite and then switching back to an equatorial entrance would be better. So that's how we're going to handle this. Had to do a lot of planning on my feet here, a lot of flying by the seat of my pants, if you will. So we're going to turn down our thrust considerably because it's only 15 meters per second delta V of a burn. So we point normal. Our solar panels get some pretty excellent sun coverage, at least that top one does. And just a refresher, if you don't remember what this satellite does, is on the bottom there's also another solar panel that is hidden by the decoupler that connects to the capsule. I still have yet to change that so it still is attached to the top of the capsule. We still have a little bit of a hat on a re-entry vehicle. It's a little funny, but not the greatest. And 3 minutes to our burn. Our time warp is canceled by the alarm clock. The alarm clock is one of the most crucial mods, I think, in Kerbal Space Program. I feel like if you're going to add any mods, the Kerbal alarm clock is a necessity. Because sometimes you have long burns, and sometimes you need a long time before your burn. And you know, you want a time warp, you want to utilize your time wisely, obviously, unless you're planning a real-time mission to the Mun. You know, there's no reason not to time warp. But time warping past your maneuver or past where you want it to be in any kind of sense is very frustrating, very unfortunate, and can make missions go sideways very easily. So if you're watching this and you typically play stock KXP but you're thinking about modding, first off, you can Google that's right, I forgot we were ready to decouple, but yeah, the decoupler had such force that it broke off the bottom solar panel, unfortunately. However, this thing has plenty of solar panels, so I'm not concerned. We have control with the KSC, so we are going to go ahead and plot in our capture burn. We're going to mark it at the periapsis and use the circularization tool. It has a slight angle to it, but I'm not too concerned about that. It'll still function well enough as a polar relay. So we're going to go ahead and hit node, let it turn towards it, hit execute, and kind of just let it go. We're going to hop back to our Kerbals, readjust their trajectory, and get ready to do some science. So already you can see the two different trajectories of the two different crafts. We now have a new line, which is like this kind of teal aquamarine color, and that is the satellite's position. So let's go ahead and just mid-course, we're going to just pull retrograde a bit, pull anti-normal, get ourselves back on a lower bypass. Pass by? Flyby? Lower flyby. Because I believe low in space on Minmus is below 30 kilometers. Maybe it's below 45 kilometers, I can't remember. But I know it's low, and therefore want to fine-tune my approach very well. And this maneuver here is only going to cost us 6.5 meters per second, so we're definitely going to need to limit our thrust on that. It's so much better to burn for 16 seconds and just do it very, very, very slowly than to burn at 1 second or even less than a second and potentially overshoot your mark. So we're just going to do some science right now. We have a lot available to us in high space over Kerbin. It turns out because we have had to restart and we didn't do any of these experiments yet, we still have them available to us. So I felt that it was important to just kind of grab it. It also is a great test of our system, and it gives Bob something to do in the meantime. So let's go ahead and pop him out on EVA. And I did not test the ladder system, so hopefully it was good, and it was. We were able to just easily transfer. We don't have a science... there's no need to bring the seismographer on here. It's a waste of space because you can only do that one landed. But I don't have the machine that collects all the science automatically, so he's going to have to come in here and grab all the pieces and then manually reset any of the things that need to be reset. And unfortunately, because I didn't test it, he is not able to grab the materials bay, the Science Junior, from the ladder itself, so he will have to go EVA. So he decided to drop off all the experiments that he's grabbed thus far, just in case something happens and he cannot make it back aboard. We carefully just scoot our way up, kind of prop our head against it, collect the data, and restore it. Now just ever so carefully bring myself back to the ladder. Bring Bob back to the ladder. This is in first-person mode, after all. It says it cannot store the experiments. I'm not entirely sure why, but we're just going to board anyways. I believe it was fine. I think it's stored regardless. I forgot to do an EVA report, so I went ahead and did that again. And because of free IVA, it went ahead and put us in first-person mode when we entered. So now it's time to time warp to our maneuver. We are all set to adjust our trajectory, make sure we have a low enough flyby for Minmus, and then it's just a matter of approaching, doing our science. When our satellite, when the alarm clock for our satellite happens, we're going to need to switch over to that and let that do its burn. And yeah, it should be a pretty interesting mission. I haven't very often in my channel done something like this where I do 2 different crafts at the same time, 2 different missions with that. I do have, I might not have that mod on this playthrough. I may have to check this out, but there is a mod where you can essentially save points in time where separations happen, where stages happen. So I could have dropped off the probe, just separated the probe from it, then controlled the Kerbals throughout the rest of the, just straight up throughout the rest of the time, let the probe core just kind of miss its mark entirely. And then using this mod, I believe it's like an F, an R, an S, and an M, all those letters in some order, I can't remember, but yeah, and then it allows you to go back in time essentially and change your control to the probe core instead, and then run the entire mission that the probe core needs to do, and it will, when you go back to the KSC, it will all happen simultaneously. So here we are. It's a nice little triangle of communication control. The probe core is reaching its spot. The Kerbals still have a ways to go before they reach low space, but they are in high space over Minmus, so once again we're going to go ahead and do our science. Just been kind of reading through some of these, but then I realized I should just grab everything. We can always read at another point. Getting Bob Kerman back out. This time we're remembering to do an EVA report right off the bat. We're also going to collect the crew report from inside that we had already done, and then take the rest of our science. Forgetting once again we can't log the science data, or the seismic data. And because of momentum and us wandering around the ship, we're starting to rotate a little bit, tilt, which isn't ideal because Bob is going to have to, once again, hop off the ladder so he can get the materials bay. And a rotating craft makes that a little bit more challenging. Also, I haven't really been able to figure out how to flip his rotation in third person. I could do it really easily in first person. But once again, this is not POV, so it's a little more challenging, so you kind of have to hope for the best in the direction that you're facing. I want to retract those little antennae, but apparently Bob can't do it in person, so we're going to see if we can do that on the outside. But for now, it's time to kind of move our way closer. Both the craft and the satellite are relatively above each other. It's a question of which one will hit its space first. We're still in space high with the Kerbals when the alarm goes off for the satellite. And even though it's a 3-minute, I had 3 minutes to go, I didn't want to risk not being able to let this craft do its burn. It was, I believe it was already locked into remote tech, so even though it has no signal, as you can see in the top left, it should be able to handle its burn entirely. And unfortunately, we are facing the wrong direction, so our solar panels are being blocked by our satellite dishes, unfortunately. But remote tech worked as intended, and all 4 of our engines fired. Once we burn off all the delta V required, we will be circularized at 1,000,000 meters above the surface. And with such a powerful communication dish, that should give us pretty good coverage on Minmus. Maybe not perfect, we may have to send another one at some point, but as I mentioned in the start of this episode, I have already recorded several of the Minmus episodes, and I have yet to send another satellite, so it actually does pretty well. It's been satisfying our needs. But yeah, that is now circularized. We didn't have a contract to put a satellite out here. Eventually we would have, but I just wanted to make use out of our first flyby. I was still initially planning on sending probes here, but I decided to take the crewed program instead. I was having trouble finding the crewed vessel, and so I thought about going to the tracking station, but I didn't think it was a bug, so I just decided to shift my focus around until I can focus on Minmus itself. And maybe that'll give me the vantage point I need to find it. And there it was, passing by the dark side of the moon. That time it's the moon. But unfortunately, we are on the wrong side of our periapsis. We are now coming back towards Kerbin, so we did indeed miss the low space science. If I was willing to risk it a little bit more, I could have time warped a little faster and possibly just gotten into the low space before needing to switch over to the other satellite, but I didn't want to risk it. And this is not going to be the last time we come to Minmus, so we can always pick up low space later. was a little frustrated by that at the time, though. So let's time warp away from Minmus and back towards Kerbin. During this time, I want to take a moment, make a little announcement. I'm very excited to bring to you, we are going to be officially creating Season 4 of KXP POV. The first time in doing a POV-only series in our new, with our new hardware, with our new setup, new graphics card, new 60 frames per second performance, and in doing so, we now have the ability to actually kind of talk in real time about the things that we're doing, why we're looking at what we're looking at, what we're clicking. So I decided the series, instead of doing a voiceover after the fact like I'm doing now, we are going to be recording ourselves live as we do our missions and play through the series. So yeah, that's going to be coming soon. I don't have a release date yet, but stay tuned and you'll see the notification. Channel members will get earlier access to it, and it will come out shortly after that. But yeah, I'm very excited about that. So now we are time warping our way to our periapsis at Kerbin, and we are going to circularize and bring our then periapsis much lower. And since we have 2000 Delta V, I have no fear at all that we have enough fuel to handle this and bring ourselves to a nice low orbit before re-entry, so we don't have to worry about potentially losing our Kerbals and a little more importantly, our tourists. We did, however, have no electrical charge, so when we did execute our maneuver, we weren't pointed towards our maneuver node. However, the gimbling on the engine and the fact that we had already programmed it into remote tech allowed it to flip itself correctly very easily. So now we're bringing down our periapsis, trying to get it just above the Kármán line at 75 kilometers. That worked out perfectly. So instantly, we're just going to turn around, plot our maneuver into the periapsis, and click on the circularize button. Once again, we have plenty of Delta V to handle it. And now that our engine's fired a little bit, we have more electric charge, so we can actually control our vessel this time. Always love this time of the mission when we're getting ready to bring our Kerbals home. It is the most dangerous because of re-entry and loss of control and whatnot, but it's always so uplifting to know that soon these Kerbals are going to put their shoes back on solid ground, and we're going to get the little notification of their achievements, and the experience they've gained from it will have our vessel either recovered or destroyed, but we'll have everything back the way that it should be. It's very gratifying. I would have to say, if I could sum up this game in one word, it's gratifying. Because just the feeling of a mission going right, of getting a craft into orbit, of landing on the Mun for the first time, of going interplanetary for the first time, you know, stations, bases, all of that. When you can just get it right and it just comes together perfectly, it's so gratifying. So now it's just a matter of taking all the data, so that way we can store it in the capsule and bring it home safely, because all of this is tacked on the side of the fuel tanks, which means that it is not going to be recovered safely back home. This will most likely burn up in the atmosphere, and that's okay. That's what we had planned for. I kind of wanted to keep our capsule very low profile, and I knew that I was going to be having Radial Science Juniors, and I don't know if I have access to a service bay big enough. I may not have. And I mean, ultimately, I just kind of didn't want to change the craft all that much. Just go with what worked. And it worked. I mean, it worked well enough. We have all of our science aboard our capsule. And we are ready to come home. So the KSC is currently in the, or about to be at nighttime. I thought it was in nighttime, so I started time warping a little faster. But I'm just going to utilize the time we have, and instead of going days and days ahead, we're just going to have a more dusk-like setup or landing. At the very end of the day, let's bring him home if it's the last thing we do. And I didn't like that approach. I don't like landing in the dark. I don't like not being able to see the clouds as I descend through, so we decided instead, let's go for an early morning approach. Let's spend our time coming through the atmosphere through the night. And using our trajectories mod, we go ahead and line ourselves up with the KSC to hopefully land as close as possible. We are going to be separating, so that is going to change our trajectory, unfortunately. Once we remove our lower engine and expose our heat shield, it will it'll make us go lower. If I were to have RC... Oh, you know what? That's an interesting thought. I didn't have that till just now, but I could put RCS on this craft and then readjust my trajectory. Still not have to carry an engine, so I can still have my heat shield absorb the heat, but then I can preserve the trajectory that it initially got. Because currently what I have to do is I'm overshooting, and then hopefully when I separate, everything will come together, but there's not a precise method. But RCS might be a good idea. I'll have to experiment with that. So we're going to go ahead and do one more maneuver to kind of bring ourselves a little bit closer. I didn't like the inclination that we were at, so and I also didn't like how far away we went. So we're going to program that into remote tech once again, and have the computer handle our burn. It's very helpful in small burns like this, because you want to, more importantly than starting on time, is stopping your burn when you need to. Look at that. That was so quick. I wouldn't have trusted my human capabilities to really handle that. So now we are about to cross the carbon line once again. Our stages are set up correctly. However, I'm just going to go ahead and decouple from the right-click menu, just to make sure we don't have any problems. And then I point myself retrograde. And as you see here, our trajectory adjusted, and we are now going to be falling short of the KSC. But we will be falling, so hopefully our trajectory isn't too, or our incoming trajectory isn't too rough that we overheat, because this isn't the 40-kilometer periapsis that I typically go for. This is kind of a get down exactly where I want as soon as possible. Going to be in the dark for a little bit. We are on the dark side of the planet, but the sun will rise soon. I bet the tourist is having a wonderful time. They are the first tourists to see another celestial body. First of probably many. Because once we can get a better space plane, once we unlock better engines, we will be able to start sending our tourists out farther and farther. But for now, let's focus on getting this one home safely. Like I mentioned before, that decoupler as a fun little hat is cute and all, but runs the risk of exploding and is very close to our capsule, so something to worry about as we come in faster and faster. But then when the heat dissipates, there's nothing to fear. We've brought this capsule in before with this little hat, and we know that it doesn't catch fire enough to warrant too concern, but having a tourist on board is a lot of stress, because if you kill a tourist, that has a huge blow to your reputation, and reputation is going to be big right now, because that's going to afford us the ability to do the missions that we want to do and go the places that we want to go. And hopefully soon that's going to be interplanetary. I ran into an issue. I was hoping to go to Jewel first, but apparently we have to start exploring Moho in order to activate the Jewel program via Strategia. So we're going to have to shift around our focus a little bit, but like I mentioned before, the next couple episodes we're going to be dealing with Minmus and rovers and science labs and all that good stuff. And pretty soon we're going to be starting up KXP POV Season 4, so I hope you're interested in that. And yeah, so once again, this is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more, more Kerbal. And if you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.